Alrighty, Ancient Battles Deluxe. I've been playing this. Hey, here's the designer's notes. I didn't notice these at all. They're hidden on the back of this little thing. And that might help me understand it a little bit. So, I'll read this later. I don't think I'm going to see any great insight here that'll feed into the review. You know, first off, I usually don't, I usually just say this in the intro and I forget by the time I get to the review, but I do have to remember that this was a review copy that I received. And it has been kind of an unfortunate thing. Most things that I get review copies for, I not to be terribly excited about. Unconditional Surrender Case Blue, it didn't really count because that's really a print and play. So, and just a taste of this bigger game that's going to come out eventually. As what it was not something I would have played. And I certainly would have never bought that. What else did I get one for? Der Weltkrieg caused a lot of headaches to me. It's probably not something I'm going to play a lot of, although there is still this temptation to get the whole thing and play it all, but that's something wrong with me. And of course, likewise with this, there's going to be this temptation to get the rest of the series. But the truth is, this is not my kind of game. Did I enjoy parts of it? Yeah, there were times when I enjoyed it. I respect it a lot. I have to say that. I think it manages to get normal, for the most part, I think it manages to get the history in a very, very well done, a very good view of the history from this way too high up for my taste view. You know, I don't want to play with just 10 little units on the board and a board this size. That's what it comes down to. And I certainly don't want to play the biggest battles in history on that scale. Is that always the case? No. Sometimes smaller games really, really please me well beyond their size would indicate. SPI's World War I comes to mind. But with these, when it comes down to the play of it, there's too much thinking. I'm sitting there agonizing over where to put, my leader and where to spend my command at any given time and such. And that's really not my taste. A lot of people really will like that. And I think that's what's so clever here, is that it manages to be a thought-filled type of game where there's still tremendous luck, as there has to be in an ancient battle. These battles, swung on some of the wildest little things. Sometimes it looked like one side had the advantage. And then, the vagaries of the combat would just completely turn it around. Okay. And I like that. I like the luck factor. I like that your best laid plans get demolished very easily in this game. Yet, you still have a great deal of input in terms of risk management, etc. There are a lot of choices where you get to pick, okay, I want to do this at this. Timing is so important. Timing's part of your choice standing. However, it just doesn't compare to me to the great battles of history. I refuse to play the simple great battles of history because I like all that detail and I like seeing all those die rolls and everything. But beyond that, the simple great battles of history lets you still see how the formations operate. This doesn't really. This becomes a game more than a simulation. It's a very, very... I'm not saying the history's at all wrong. It's just the focus from the player's point of view is more on playing the game, at least for me, than watching this story unfold. I'm too busy thinking about what I need to do. The actions are very simple. There's just not a lot of time for that kind of, I don't know, I'm flipping a lot of pieces, thinking about the battle, looking at it, there we go. There's no broad panorama. There's no sweeping chariot maneuvers or cav charges running by, firing arrows. None of that's there, and that's the stuff that, I really love in Great Battles of History. What is here is this really, really clever system that you kind of look at it and say, gee, as you're reading the rules, that sounds really complicated. And then when you're actually playing it, it really isn't. I don't know if the rules could be simplified a great deal. I almost feel like they can be. It feels to me like the procedural style that these are presented in, which is always hard for me, actually expands them. Maybe not, though. You've only got 12 pages of rules. This is the size rule book that your earlier SPI S&T games came with, right? The print is maybe even a little larger. There's lots of color pictures. So you probably can't trim it much, but it feels very, very hard to grasp to me the way it's explained, especially things like the combat system. And especially when you play it and you say, well, it's easy. Well, yeah, but it's hard to explain it. And without, every game being the same, it's not, you're not going to just be able to pick it up like an S&T game and say, oh, yeah, I get all that. Okay, there's the 3 rules I need to know, On the other hand, this is part of a series, and there are many, many games in it, and you can just pick them all up and get all, such a breadth of history, from the chariots, apparently beyond what this game provides, into the early gunpowder period. And to tell you the truth, I don't see any reason, this is part of the issue, I don't see any reason that this exact system couldn't be used for just about anything. Yeah, you might have to tinker with movement if you have jump troops coming from off-planet, but not much. And that's kind of the, okay, well, that's what you have with, say, Napoleon at Waterloo, or the old Blitzkrieg-style games, or whatever, is that, yeah, this system kind of works for everything, and it's also very generic in that sense. This still does manage to capture all these special units. It takes a couple pages to explain all those features. But there is still sort of this, okay, I'm moving pieces around and trying to get these advantages, but it just doesn't feel like the battle in the way that I want it to. Maybe that's a limitation on my part. I don't know. This is tremendous, though. You have, once you've played a couple of turns of the game and rolled a couple combat charts, results, you're just like, this is all you need. Every now and then you might need to look up some special rule, like Army Panic, or the optional rules. Let's talk about components, though. Components are a sad thing. Victory Point games, they kind of have this, hey, with a little company that could, or whatever. Yeah, but barely, to me, it's not much more than, say, what Steve Jackson Games used to produce on the, sure, this is harder paper, and it costs more, I understand that. And, hey, you got actual mounted counters, but they're mounted on weird stuff that's kind of squishy, and it's funny, and it slips out of your hand and goes flying all over. The map's kind of slick. My biggest complaint comes with the rules themselves. All that color, all that, the highlighting. To me, that's just so distracting, and that's something that I think is just fundamental to what Victory Point Games is putting out. That this is how you teach people rules. You put all kinds of color and you put all kinds of highlighting. And hey, maybe it works for 80% of people, but you are going to turn off that 20% who say, yeah, I just really, I don't highlight my rules. And I don't do that for a reason. If I highlighted rules, if I wanted to do that, maybe I'd be happy to have pre-highlighted rules. But if you go to a bookstore, a used bookstore, and somebody's got a highlighted book, it's usually marked down more than the rest of them for a reason. It's harder to sell. There is a significant portion of the market that says, yeah, I don't want that. I might highlight myself because that helps me remember, but I don't particularly want highlight anyway. Going too far in that, no question. The counters are too big for the hexes. There's this crowding. It's fine, in games where there's very few pieces, in the scenarios where there's very few pieces on the board, it's okay, but whenever it gets crowded, it's really hard to get your fingers in play. It's especially hard, and it's got to do with the composition of the pieces to get these stacking, the little operational counters that indicate that you did something off the pieces. I'm told the do-it-yourself scenario generator tool is better in terms of the component quality, except, well, you end up with a blank map that you've got to use little hexes to fill in your terrain with. That actually makes a lot of sense. Maybe a little tacky stuff to glue it down. What this really aims at, from what I see, is that very cerebral, competitive type of gamer. But it may have a little bit too much luck for that gamer. Now, obviously, there is an option to remove the luck with the averaging dice. Of course, there you're throwing away what makes it an ancient battle. But I don't know how much the competitive gamer really cares about that. Another factor is the scenarios don't really discuss how well balanced they are. And some of them are, the balance varies quite significantly. Some of them feel very, very balanced, but some of them really do not. I can't really remember terribly well in my head which ones, but I remember, Panic Burning Easy. It looked so easy. It was deceptive. I have so many English, but man, that command control roll, that just kills you. Arsuf, I don't think was terribly balanced. It felt like the Crusaders had a huge edge there. There was an even bigger one without the optional roll. Granicus, tough fight. I'd say the advantage goes to the other side. It certainly felt that way to me. It was really hard to get my Macedonians into play. Taranaya, I think, was in favor of the Macedonians, though. But I don't remember too hard. It wouldn't have been too heavy. Anyway, the point is there are some blowouts in here, I think. Maybe not as bad as in Great Battles of History. But I think you'd have to kind of skim through and maybe find a third to a half the scenarios that would really, really sit well as sort of tournament scenarios. Now, there's a little tweaking you can do. Obviously, you can play around with how much you want to use, say, the command control rules, or maybe reduce somebody's panic number by a little bit or something like that. So you've got a little bit of control there where somebody could put things together. The advantage, of course, you could see such a broad swath of history with really one very simple set of rules. The disadvantage, I'm just not seeing the detail, and I'm not seeing that broader scope that I like. But take the broader scope away, I'm not seeing, say, chariots riding by the enemy, shooting them up. That was a beautiful scene in Chariots of Fire for me. And here, well, they don't even have arrows. They don't even have arrows, do they? Or if they do, you don't have sort of that mobile fire. Yeah, they do have arrows. They did have arrows. But they don't have the ability to move and fire at the same time, which I feel is necessary to horse archers and chariots. It does not make sense to say, yeah, I'm parking up next to you so that next turn I can loose my arrows. You might be able to say, okay, you can abstract that away. when I charge up to you, you can run away. You've got all these advantages. And I can say, sure, but it feels like the Napoleon's Art of War, the SPI thing. I'm abstracting a hell of a lot there. And I kind of start to say, okay, why am I really playing a war game if I'm not seeing the details to the level that I want to see them? For some people, it could be fine. For some people, it's just great to play something that's got that sort of military theming. And like I said, I think it's pretty good on the history. Maybe in some ways better than the great battles of history. Yeah, it's Men of Iron I'm considering here. I think it handles Bannockburn better than Men of Iron did. Men of Iron, I felt like I just did not have that enforced charge as ugly as I did here. Here, it's up to chance, and I have some influence on that chance. But when it happens, it's real bad. Alright, anyway, I hope by watching the playthroughs and such not, you get a better idea of whether it'll work for you better than it does for me. Like I said, I really respect the system, the design, the thought that went into creating this. It just didn't work for me. You know, it's not fun in the way. Take what I just did, Conquistador. There's not a lot I respect in Conquistador, but I had a lot of fun with it. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell what'll strike any given person. Alright.